Welcome to Social Element Ministries, where we are committed to glorifying God while exposing the devil. This is a continuation in the series about answering your calling. I've stated before that you should not get too focused on having a title. For example, those listed in Ephesians 4:11. Your function will be more important than your title. In some cases, the Lord may not give you a title for a very good reason. And there are a lot of biblical examples of that. For example, in Genesis 37, the Lord gave Joseph two dreams, and Joseph had an interpretation of those dreams. However, it did not mean that the Lord was calling Joseph to be a prophet who would go around interpreting dreams. Yes, in Genesis 41, we see that the Lord used Joseph to interpret Pharaoh's two dreams. And as a result of that, Joseph was put in an exalted position. He was made governor over Egypt, basically second in command. So the Lord wasn't calling him to be a prophet to go around interpreting dreams or going around saying, "Thus saith the Lord." Joseph was put in charge so that he could prepare Egypt for the coming famine. However, the Lord had an even greater purpose for him. When his family came to Egypt, Joseph was basically responsible for giving birth to the nation of Israel. When his family joined him, there were about a total of 70 people. However, when they left, the number had increased significantly. Some estimates are as much as 3 million. That was through Joseph. So again, Joseph's function was more important than his title from the Lord. And there are other examples. Ezekiel and Daniel are both prophets. They were actually compatriots who were taken from Jerusalem and into exile into Babylon. Ezekiel, he actually served as a priest. Daniel was brought to be among the wise men in King Nebuchadnezzar's court. Yes, the Lord blessed Daniel with knowledge and wisdom to include in dream interpretation. And when King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream in Daniel chapter 2, the Lord used Daniel to interpret that dream. And as a result of that, in Daniel 2:48 it states, "Then the king made Daniel a great man, and gave him many gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and chief of the governors over all the wise men of Babylon." So again, even though Daniel was a prophet, he wasn't functioning in the office of the prophet, so to speak, as one who would go around making all these proclamations in the name of the Lord, or even, in a sense, having open hours for people to come in and get their dreams interpreted. He was the governor over Babylon. But there was a higher purpose for it, because King Nebuchadnezzar would have another dream, which would indicate that he needed to keep his pride in check. And he did fall as a result of too much pride. And in Daniel 4:34 through 37, we see an even higher purpose for Daniel. And he was more than just a governor. In a sense, he was also an evangelist. So in Daniel 4:34, it states, "And at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up mine eyes unto heaven, and mine understanding returned unto me. And I blessed the Most High, and praised and honored him that liveth forever, whose dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation." And in the 37th verse, "Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, all of whose works are true, and his ways judgment, and those that walk in pride he is able to abase." King Nebuchadnezzar came to have an understanding and a respect for the Lord through Daniel. So even though he was a prophet, it wasn't that he was going around making all these proclamations in the name of the Lord, but the Lord used Daniel to bring Nebuchadnezzar closer to him. And there's more. When King Nebuchadnezzar was succeeded by his son Belshazzar, there was a writing on the wall for that king, literally. And I want to get into the Mene, Tekel, Upharsin translation. But the king was afraid when he saw the writing on the wall. And in Daniel 5:10 through 11, it gives a little bit more as far as what Daniel did. "Now the queen, by reason of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banquet house, and the queen spake and said, O king, live forever. Let not thy thoughts trouble thee, nor let thy countenance be changed. There is a man in thy kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And in the days of thy father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, was found in him, whom the king Nebuchadnezzar, thy father, the king, I say, thy father made master of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers. That right there may sound controversial, and it is, because the Lord is against astrology, soothsayers, divination, yet Daniel, a man of God, was in charge of those men. So again, your function is more important than your title. But one thing to note, even though Daniel was in charge of the astrologers, and he may have been trained in astrology and all those things, he was a man of God, and he didn't let those things come into him. If anything, he was the one teaching them the ways of God. So again, the Lord may call you to something. He may not even tell you what the title is, but the most important thing to concern yourself with are your functions. David was a prophet, but his primary function was as king of Israel. And one of the most notable things, at least in my opinion, that David actually prophesied is something a lot of people don't realize. In Psalms 22, verse 1, and some of you may recognize these words, and it states, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? I'll just stop right there. So again, according to David, Psalm 22:1, it says, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Psalms are collections of songs and poems. In a lot of cases, a person who is a psalmist may sing or write or say things that people don't even realize that they're prophetic. But those words from Psalm 22:1 can be found in a couple of scriptures, to include Mark 15:34. Mark 15:34, which states, and at the 9th hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice saying, and this is while Jesus was on the cross, suffering for our sins, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, which is being interpreted, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? So even though David was a king, he was also a prophet, and he also functioned as a psalmist, who is a type of prophet. And not to be outdone, in the book of Esther, the young lady Hadassah, who we commonly know as Esther, she was a Jewish woman who was in exile in Persia Media. And the king at the time was King Ahasuerus, also known as King Xerxes. King Xerxes had a wife, Vashti, who was disobedient, so he put her away. And he sought a wife. He ended up marrying Esther. As a result of Esther's position, she saved the lives of the Jews who were in exile. But even though she was a queen, the Lord had another function for her that was much higher. And I say all of that to say this. You may have a calling from the Lord, and you may think that the Lord wants you to go to a seminary, and he wants you to preach from a pulpit every Sunday, and probably Wednesday or whenever Bible study is, but that may not be the case. A modern day example of this is actually a couple that I know, and they own a automotive repair shop, but that is their ministry. And I actually found it out basically the first day I went to the office, and I just knew that is where God had assigned them. And even though they're not preaching the gospel from a pulpit, they are reaching people from their office. So again, don't make assumptions about what the Lord has called you to do. He may not give you a title, because your most important function is to be a servant of the Most High God. God bless you.